Hello, my name is Wang No Lee from Hanmaum Church in Chinchon. I relied on alcohol to deal with my feelings of frustration and anxiety, and I had no purpose in life. Then I met the risen Jesus and found eternal freedom. I want to share my testimony with you. I'm the eldest of 3 kids, and when we were young, my father would drink and fight with my mother. Then he would beat and mistreat her very badly. I was too afraid of my father to try to stop him. When he got angry, I was terrified of the light in his eyes, and that made it even harder for me to talk to him. When my father came home drunk, I got so nervous that I could hardly breathe. I felt so anxious that something might happen. I felt like the anxiety was chasing me down. That's why our family hardly ever talked. We didn't have a relationship. We all just lived separately. I was a quiet person. My aunts would tell me that if I said the word aunt just once, they'd give me allowance. But even then, I didn't open my lips. I was also very timid. I barely managed to get a job because my friend introduced me to someone he knew. But this job had me go into supermarkets and sell them products they didn't have. That meant I had to go into the store and talk. At first, I would go into the store, but I couldn't bring myself to talk. So I just stand there and then come back out again. It was so hard for me to approach people and talk with them first. What gave me comfort from this kind of a personality was alcohol. Because of my father, my mother had told me to never drink or smoke, so I thought I would never do those things. But instead, I began to drink and smoke even earlier, starting from when I was in middle school, as I hung out with my friends. The truth was, I didn't like drinking at first, and I wasn't any good at it either. I was timid and quiet, so I could make friends by drinking. Life was no fun, but when I drank, I could forget everything and be free. When I was drunk, I could do things I normally couldn't do, so my frustrations and anxieties would go away. That's why I came to rely on alcohol more and more. One time, I felt so good after I drank that I climbed on top of a random car on the street and began jumping. I jumped on it for a long time, and I felt all my frustrations leave me. I felt like I had the whole world. The next day, my mother had to pay for the damages. They say you get fearless when you drink. I guess that was why I would turn into a wild beast who looked like he could conquer the whole world. But in the morning, I became a total coward. Whenever I drank, I had to get completely plastered. Otherwise, I couldn't sleep because of all the worries and all kinds of complicated thoughts about the next day. It felt good while I was drinking, but when I woke up in the morning, I would find all kinds of cuts and bruises on my body, or my clothes would be torn up. When I was dating my wife, she once asked me why I had a scar under my nose. I lied and said I got it when I was playing soccer. But the truth was that most of my scars are from when I got drunk. My front teeth aren't real either. I once had plastic surgery because I had skin ripped off of my face. There are a lot of scars here and there from stitches too. People get plastic surgery to get better looking, but for me it was the opposite. I ruined my nice face thanks to alcohol. Not only did I rely on alcohol, I also had no clear goal in life. I had things I wanted to do, but I was too timid and too passive to try to pursue them. It was hard to live with such little self-confidence. If it was possible, I wanted to not work. I even hated eating. When I fell asleep, I really hated having to wake up again. When I was in my mid-20s, I had no desire for money or status, like other people do. I was content with the simple pleasures of life. When I had played soccer all day long, or when I was sitting at the riverbank with a cigarette in my mouth and a shot of vodka and some pork in my hands, I felt like I had everything I needed. Although drinking was my only pleasure in life, I had so many accidents because of it. Waking up under someone else's car was the least of my problems. Whenever I drank, I got behind a driver's wheel and just hit the accelerator. The more I sped, the more I loved it because I felt like I was flying. When I was in the military, they would pass around rice wine in a big yellow kettle during any recreational event. I was alone in the barracks one time, and I kept drinking the wine from the kettle that everyone in the platoon was supposed to drink, a little at a time till I drank almost all of it. I don't remember what happened, but I hear that I caused a big scene during roll call and turned the whole unit upside down. One time, I was drunk and I wanted to stay over at a friend's house, so I turned the corner and I saw a police car. I got surprised, so I backed up my car, but at that moment, I heard the rear window break and something big and long entered the car. It was a telephone pole. It was there because it was under construction. The pole went right through the space between my friend and me. We could have died. My friend and I looked at each other in shock, but we didn't want to get caught by the police. We didn't even discuss it aloud. We threw back our seats and laid flat so that the police wouldn't see us. Luckily, the police car passed us by. Another time, I got drunk at a friend's house and I wanted to sleep there, but another friend kept saying he wanted to go home. I was sleepy, but since he kept saying that, I said, okay, and I drove as my friend followed me in his own car. We were passing by a construction site when I crashed into 15 iron barricades that was being used to block off the site, all at once. My car flipped over 1.5 times in the air and landed upside down. I was fine, but my friend thought I was dead or seriously hurt. All that time, I used to brag that I never got caught drinking and driving, but I ended up losing my license after that. That should have woken me up. But the day before I took my license exam again, I was playing around with my friend after we got drunk and struck my head on asphalt. That night, I was taken to the emergency room. So on the actual day of the exam, I had my head covered in bandages, a mask over my mouth, and a cast on my arm. The staff had to take a long look at me and my ID, trying to figure out if I was the right person. I drove the car in that condition and passed the exam, and then I drank and celebrated and bragged as if I was a legend or something. You would normally think that all these accidents should make you want to quit drinking, but I had absolutely no desire to quit. That's because I didn't think that I could ever quit, even if I wanted to, and I had no confidence to live without alcohol. But at some point, my life felt so empty and meaningless, even when I drank every day. There was a void that alcohol couldn't fill. My health suffered, and it was hard to take care of even just my own body. Then I met my wife and got married. I had a lot of drinking buddies from my wife's family. My wife couldn't drink, but she liked to be with her family. My brothers-in-law, my nephew, and I drank and ate pork together every week. On our wedding day, we didn't leave for our honeymoon right away. Instead, I spent the whole night drinking with my in-laws. My wife was a beautician, so after we got married, she suggested that we run a beauty salon together. Next to our salon, we had a couple who sold educational materials, and they went to the Hanmaum church. One day, the husband started coming over to our salon and talking to us about Jesus' resurrection all the time. So I told him, I'm a Christian too. I know about the resurrection. On Easter, I eat eggs. But he would still keep talking about the resurrection every single time he came over. One day, he asked me, could you give your daughter up for your worst enemy? I thought that was such a random question. But this man had such a loud, booming voice, and he had his fist in the air like he was at some kind of speech competition. I felt like God did exist, but I felt like he had made such a complicated way for us to get to him and demanded that we find him. That was because I thought God must be as terrifying as my own father was. When I was young, I couldn't even imagine committing suicide because of my fear of hell. Whenever I thought about my fear of hell, I wanted to meet God, but I felt like God wouldn't want to meet someone like me. But still, I thought I should meet God somehow before I die, and I had to stay alive till that happened. A year passed. Then one day, this man gave me a thick book and recommended that I read it. The book was about how the main characters had been shocked to find out that what they believed in all their lives as absolute and what it said in the Bible were different. Then they ended up submitting to the fact that the Bible was God's word, and confessed that only through Jesus could you know the real God and the real truth. I had thought that the Bible was God's word, but it wasn't an absolute truth to me. But now I realized that the Bible had to be an absolute standard. I kept thinking about the word absolute. I had gone to church, but I had not really read the Bible. The characters in the book and I had the same problem, so meeting the unseen God and solving my problems of salvation and sin became my most urgent priority. I knew that the answer was in the Bible, but I didn't know how I should find it in this thick Bible. I read the Bible, but I had no idea what it was saying. So I wanted to find a church that had a solid basis on the Word. But there were so many churches, and I had no idea where to go. I was suspicious of everything. I didn't think I should completely and blindly trust the man from next door either. But I began to pay attention to what he was saying. Before, I only half listened, and I didn't understand anything he was saying either. But now I was desperate. He was telling me that Jesus had died for my sins and risen again to become my Lord, and that he was God. But I kept having doubts about whether Jesus was God. How could a person die and then come back to life? I just couldn't believe that. But he was telling me that the resurrection of Jesus was a historical fact. It was written that Jesus' disciples had also all run away when Jesus died on the cross, and only after he had risen from the dead did they believe in his words and what the Bible said. It was a historical fact, but I still couldn't believe it. I started going to church, and through the summer retreat, these words became real to me. Isaiah 53, "But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed." We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. The pastor proclaimed these words on the first day of the retreat. At that moment, these words stuck to my heart. I cried and cried whenever I read these verses. I couldn't stop crying till the end of the worship service. Then all the things I had read and heard became all connected. Jesus had died for my sins and risen again to accomplish everything. Isaiah 9, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." The mighty God, everlasting Father, had come to this world in the body of a man, as it was prophesied in the scriptures, and became part of history for real. The resurrection. It was the resurrection. He was my true Lord and God. Now I could understand what my neighbor had meant. I could never give up my daughter for an enemy. But the Father God had sent his only Son Jesus for me, who had thrown him away, and I was his enemy. He had died on the cross for my sins, and risen again to become my Lord. But if I still didn't believe in Jesus, I was committing an evil sin, and that had to send me to hell. I was not anxious and worried because of my circumstances or surroundings. I had wrecked my mind and body through drinking and smoking and lived an aimless life, all because I hadn't believed in Jesus. My life had been my own. My body had been my own. But through the resurrection, I met my Lord.
Amen.
I repented the sin of not believing in Jesus as Lord. and I accepted Jesus, who died and rose again for me, as Lord into my heart. All I can do was thank my Lord in tears. After I received Jesus as my Lord, I felt the joy and peace that I had never experienced before in this world take over my heart, which used to be filled with frustration and anxiety. Before, I couldn't sleep because of all the worries and complicated thoughts about tomorrow. But now that Jesus was my Lord, I could sleep so well. It used to be unimaginable for me to sleep without drinking. And I didn't even try to quit drinking and smoking. But one day, I realized that I had just naturally quit. Also, I was someone who was too timid to go talk to people first. But now, I approach people first to share the gospel with them. That doesn't mean my timid personality has changed, but because my heart was joyful, I came to share the gospel with people I met. I shared the gospel with my parents and my siblings. I shared the gospel with customers at the salon whenever I could. I also shared with my in-laws. I used to be their drinking buddy, but now I was telling them that Jesus rose again, that they should believe in Jesus. They were so confused. Since I wasn't drinking anymore, they kept asking me to drink whenever we met. They said that they thought I would go back to drinking after some time passed. But when I didn't and kept sharing the gospel with them, they stopped calling us altogether. But my wife and I continued to pray for them and serve them. I also shared Jesus' resurrection with my friends. I had been someone who would clean out the alcohol stash in my friends' homes and pass out. My friends clearly remembered how I used to be. So now that I was sharing Jesus' resurrection, they just couldn't get used to me. They got concerned for me and said, "How are you going to handle not drinking?" Because all my friends were drinking buddies, they stopped contacting me when I kept sharing the resurrection with them, and I felt sad and compassionate for them. I had a friend who had once broken his leg after falling off a high place when he was drunk. This time, he had done it again. But this time, he was almost paralyzed. Before I didn't know about the spiritual world, so I thought he had done things like that just because he was drunk. But now, I thought this might be a spiritual issue. So I visited him at the hospital and asked him if he saw evil spirits. Then my friend got very surprised and asked me how I knew that. He told me that both times he fell, evil spirits had chased him, so he had run away, terrified before he fell. This time, he told me that he must have seen every evil spirit in our province as he drank. He said that they appeared in front of him one by one. Then he had run away as they chased him and cornered him to a ledge, and that was how he had fallen again. I shared the gospel with him, and he accepted the risen Jesus in his heart as Lord.
Amen.
I had to share the gospel that had been freely given to me. I was someone who relied on drinking and smoking to deal with my frustrations and anxiety, and I lived an aimless life with no desire or purpose. But now, I rely on the risen Jesus, who is my Lord, as I fulfill my mission and live a free and happy life. You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. I hope for eternal freedom in Jesus. Thank you.